I don't know why or how you are doing this. If you are doing this, but I need you to help me, Sam. I need to know what is going on. I need the crew.
Hello everybody, and welcome to this video looking at Observation. This is a new game that comes to us from Devolver Digital, and it's a little bit different to a lot of the stuff I generally cover on this channel because it's not very anime, it's not very Japanese developed, and it's very different, but I wanted to cover it because it is different and because I think it is a really good example of, I guess, the games as art thing, which is the thing I do like to talk about and don't get a chance to as much as I'd like because a lot of the games don't really fit into that mold. But this one is certainly a game that has been created for the sake of making art as a game, and it's not going to be for everybody as a result. It's a little bit esoteric. Actually, it's a very esoteric game, and it has a lot of imagery in there which will only really make sense, I guess, to anybody who has seen 2001 A Space Odyssey. That's the Stanley Kubrick film, of course, that I'm talking about. This game is so clearly inspired by it. I would suggest the developers that made it probably watch this movie every day of the year, because it is a very... If Stanley Kubrick was going to turn 2001 A Space Odyssey into a video game, it would probably be this one. And this game covers many of the same themes. It's got a slightly different focus, I guess, because 2001 A Space Odyssey obviously had all that commentary in there about humanity and, you know, the imagery of the apes and the obelisk and all that kind of stuff. That's not so prevalent in this one. This one is more focused on the interaction between people and computers, and more particularly people and artificial intelligence, and the potential for artificial intelligence to kind of do us wrong. So I guess it does have a slightly different focus to the film, but thematically, stylistically, visually, tonally, it's all very familiar to anybody who has seen that movie. To anybody who hasn't, it's going to be an extra hurdle to get over to really get into this game. But it's worth it. I mean, just like I would recommend 2001 A Space Odyssey to everybody who cares about anything to do with the potential for film, or for film to be art. Just as I would recommend that film to everybody, I recommend this game to anybody that wants to see the potential for games to be used as a storytelling medium, and for games to latch into a level of depth that we don't often see. This one works on metaphoric levels, it works on thematic levels, it works on all these levels that we don't often see developers explore, and that's why I found it so engaging and so interesting right from the outset. So what do you actually do in Observation? It's a difficult game to describe in terms of gameplay, but perhaps the best place to start would be to talk about who you play in this game. You play as an AI computer program called Sam, and Sam's job is to basically help this woman who's stranded on a space station that has gone through some kind of disaster. You're not sure what. She wakes up very confused. She has to put out a whole bunch of fires, quite literally so, at the start. The space station is in all kinds of dire straits. Once she gets that done, and once the immediate danger has passed and settled down, the goal is then to figure out what is going wrong with this space station. And on top of that, what is going wrong with Sam, because as Sam, you're getting all these weird commands about what you need to do, and you're not quite sure where they're coming from or what's compelling you to do these things. So there's a whole lot of mystery in there. It's obviously going dark places right from the start, but how you get there it's an interesting process. In terms of gameplay, it's quite simple. You play, because you are playing as Sam, you can jump from camera to camera within this space station, and each room has multiple cameras. And in those rooms, you need to solve one puzzle after another by finding the right camera, locking onto the right thing, and then sometimes completing some kind of mini game, which will then let you progress to the next thing. So it's kind of like a series of mini games, and the best way to describe the overall gameplay is if you played a game called Republic, which came out quite a few years ago now. It is available on PlayStation and whatever as well. It started out as a mobile game. It's a little bit like that, where you are not directly involved in the narrative. You're kind of you're one step back from that. You're the observer, hence the title of the game. You're the observer, and your job, I guess, your role in the game is to be that kind of it works a little bit like a book. It works a little bit like literature, where you're actually watching what's going on. You have a little bit more role to play in this game because you can actually directly influence things, but it's still not really about you. It's more about watching the main character and watching how they interact with you, which is different. We're used to having direct control over the main character in our games. So when a game like this comes along, which challenges that, which changes that, and which does really interesting things with that, because you're not a completely reliable narrator as such. Sam is not reliable, and you get that sense straight away. Something has gone wrong with Sam. To figure out what it is, you need to piece together, firstly, the information that Sam has, and then also how this woman is interacting with Sam. So it's rich. It plays out a bit like a mystery, and it's complex, and it takes a lot of unpacking to really get a feel for. It's not the fastest paced game out there, but at the same time there is a sense of urgency about the narrative because of the hostile nature of the environment that the woman's stuck in. So all of this comes together to create something that is genuinely compelling from start to finish. And of course it raises all these questions that other books, other films, including 2001: A Space Odyssey, other games have all raised. It's nothing inside Observation is, I guess, a necessarily new theme. I mean, the main discussion that goes on within the game is the application of AI in our lives and our reliance on computers and technology, and where that could potentially take us and the risks involved with that. So none of that is anything that hasn't already been discussed a million times over by now. But how Observation does it is really interesting, and it's helped by a really good, solid performance from the woman. She's I can't remember the name of the character, to be honest, because you're so busy just listening to her kind of yell commands at you, and she's not really talking to other people so much. It's easy to forget her name, but she's particularly well performed. The environment is great. I mean, when you think about games that are set out in space, you think obviously about openness and that freedom to explore, but to then set that kind of science fiction narrative inside a small and confined space station gives you that really great sense of claustrophobia and danger, and it has that horror vibe to it, which is really well executed. So this game is intriguing. It is nothing original, but the way it does things is really well executed, and it pushes things a little bit further, I think, than a lot of other games would. Video games tend to be quite straightforward and easily accessible because they want everybody to be able to get the message as they're playing them, but this game is more willing to be complex. It's willing to actually challenge you intellectually as you're playing, not just in terms of your button pressing abilities, because there's not too much of that. There's not too much kind of skill testing involved in this game, but it is a challenging game in terms of the intellectually being able to unpack what's going on, to be able to form theories about what's going on, to be able to analyze what it all kind of means is a complex thing in this game, and I think that's quite impressive as well. Now, as a video game, Observation's not perfect because it is fairly because it is fairly esoteric and because it's more interested in the thematics and the atmosphere and the storytelling than necessarily being accessible, there are times where you'll be struggling to figure out exactly what you need to do. There was one case fairly early on where the woman actually says to you, I have absolutely no idea what you're doing, but you need to fix this problem. And you then need to purely trial and error your way through what is a fairly complex puzzle, because there isn't any instructions, and it's not immediately obvious what you even need to do to get the puzzle started. So you need to have a certain level of patience with this game to be willing to plug through its more confusing or less accessible elements in order to start to dig through and get into the gameplay. The consequences of failing puzzles and all that is not too significant. Most of the time you can keep plowing through the game regardless of what kind of goes on. You've got all the time in the world to get stuff done. But again, it just requires patience. It requires the ability to scan every inch of the room, through 3 or 4 different cameras in order to pick out the next tiny spot that you need to. You need to be very observant. So I guess the title's kind of appropriate there, but you do need to be very observant of what's going on around you, and what you're seeing in the environment. There's no kind of flashing lights to show you where you need to go next or what you need to focus on. It's all very naturalistic in the environment. And again, that's because the developers wanted this to be a more authentic kind of experience as opposed to a more accessible one. So it's not perfect as a video game, but it is hard to put down as a video game precisely for those same reasons. When you do figure out puzzles, you want to keep playing on, you feel pretty good about yourself for figuring it out. The initiative is constantly on you, and because of that, there is a great sense of reward for moving through the game. And it's not too long. This game, like most of what Devolver Digital publishes, knows its limits, which is good. I always approve of video games that do know their limits. This one definitely doesn't outstay its welcome. It's kind of a get in, get it done, get out kind of experience. And because of that, it's actually very replayable, because there's just so much going on with the visuals, because the world is so full of elements, and because the story is so dense and layered. This is a very replayable game, and it's one that you'll be thinking about for quite a while after you finish. You'll play it 2-3 times, and you'll constantly be thinking about what it all means and just how unique and interesting this experience is. So I guess that's my big approval of this game. I really did enjoy this one. I think it's an amazing example of an art house video game, and I think that anybody who has a taste down that way, anybody who enjoys thinking about the games that they're playing, anybody who enjoys the game that makes them think, will really appreciate this one. So enjoy it. I've got a full review going up on digitallydownloaded.net soon enough as well. If you do enjoy my videos and my reviews and all of my stuff, please do consider backing me on Patreon. It really does help. Every $1, even if you can only contribute $1 a month, that actually really does help me do more of these videos, do more of my content, and it's nice to know that people out there are enjoying what I'm doing, I guess. So thanks very much for tuning in. I'll be back with more Japanese anime stuff, no doubt, very soon, and we will see you at the next video.
That's it, it's working. The fumes are dissipating now.